The Sacramento Kings, a team in turmoil, and now they could be a major seller on the trade market. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel, joined by Donnie Freeman. Donnie, there's some interesting players on the Kings. You got DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine now. You've got Malik Monk. You got Sabonis. I mean, crying out loud, Sabonis is phenomenal. And some of these guys are probably not going to be on the team for long because this team, man, it is still a mess.
Yeah, it's kind of what happens when you trade one of the cornerstones of your team mid-season. It can be kind of hard to rebalance the roster in a way that can keep you competitive. And they tried to do it by making the most lateral move of all time, by bringing in Zach LaVine, things like that. And it hasn't worked out to, I don't think anybody's surprised really, but ultimately on the Sabonis piece, it left him kind of holding the bag and he's wondering where things go from here. So
yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. This is from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points. Now he does mention, the firing of Mike Brown, who was the coach of the year last year, and now this year is being moved on from, or 2 seasons ago was the coach of the year, and now he barely lasted a solid chunk of the season this year. And they didn't. I mean, hey, Taylor Jenkins just got fired by the Grizzlies. At least they told him to his face. Kings didn't even tell. They waited for Mike Brown to drive away and then called him and said you're fired. Now, one of the things that we needed to get into here is there's some rumblings that there could be major changes in the front office with Vivek Ranadive to potentially turn back to an old familiar face, Vlade Divac.
Of all the people.
Right. I mean, that would be surprising to see him back in Sacramento. But the bottom line is Sacramento's looking at a lot, not just the players, but also the front office personnel that could be changing over this summer.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think that when it comes down to it, they've got a lot of different decisions that they need to make. And we talked a little bit about Sabonis. I think he's probably the biggest decision that they do have to make. But really, they have so many guys that are on their books, whether it's DeRozan or otherwise, that they may need to make decisions on. So, I mean, for me personally, Vlade, maybe this time things work out a little bit better, but I didn't think he was great in the first stint.
I mean, hey, he passed on Luka despite having all the intel on him.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to live down.
Exactly. But this is the big question. What is the direction? Now that they've traded De'Aaron Fox, what all the players want to know, DeRozan, he doesn't have a lot of time left. He's going to be 36 in August. What is the direction of the Kings at this point? Every player on the roster wants to know, and many around the league are preparing for the Kings to be big sellers. Now, they're talking about the 2026 trade deadline. Wouldn't shock me, though, if they try to get ahead of the game and get into that this summer, which will likely result in Sabonis requesting a trade as well, should a clear direction not present itself. So the Kings need to figure out, are we trying to win right now or not? And if not, does that mean we need to move on from Sabonis? Would Sabonis himself, if they say, you know what, we're going to trade away players and we're going to get future draft capital, would Sabonis himself say, you know what, that's it, I'm out? Let's get into that and where he could potentially land right after this. First, a quick shout out to our sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports. Use the link in the description down below and our promo code Bulletin. Get a guaranteed $50 on your first $5 play. They do a great job with daily fantasy. And let's take a look here at some of the potential plays for this evening. Let's go real quick. Jimmy Butler, 30.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Steph Curry is back. That's not high of a number.
No, he'll get it.
He'll get that, especially against New Orleans. And then Devin Booker at 11.5 rebounds and assists. Especially with their backs against the wall, I think Booker's going to play a bunch. So I think he gets that too.
That's fair as well.
Let's go there. $10 entry fee would get you $30. Use that link in the description down below and then use our promo code Bulletin. Get a guaranteed $50 on your first $5 played over on Prize Picks. All right. So if Sabonis does wind up getting traded, or if the Kings, well, I guess first, Donnie, what should the Kings do? The Kings need to pick a direction, no question. What should that direction be?
It's weird because, like I've said before, I lived in Market for a long time when I was born and after born, and the Kings have not really been good in my life. And as a result, they are one of the laughing stocks, if not the laughing stock of the NBA up to this point after such a long drought. And so the reason why they decided, in my opinion, to make that move for Levine as opposed to trying to get somebody like Castle or rebuilding, etc., was because they wanted to stay competitive. They've been competitive finally for the last couple of years. And I think that the fans in the market really do appreciate that. But I think the smart decision would be to try to rebuild again. I don't really see, unless the ceiling for this team, even with Fox, wasn't championship. It was merely contention in the playoffs. And if that's the goal, which I believe it was, to be honest, then sure. But I can still see that here, but I think they're going to need to rebalance this roster. Their books are terrible with these player salaries. I think Zach LaVine, DeRozan's a little bit older. I don't really like him at 25 a couple years from now, right? That's on there as an option, I believe.
Yeah, and DeMar DeRozan, he's DeMar DeRozan has some non-guaranteed money at the end of that season. There, here, let me show you here on the cap sheet. So he's got 25.7 is his 2026-2027 salary. However, I believe that is not all entirely guaranteed money there. Yeah, in fact, let's see, cap hit. Anyway, it's grayed out, so that means it's not all entirely guaranteed. But I'd have to go dig a little deeper and dig into exactly what that's at. But still, 23.4 million this season, 25 almost million next season. He's then extension eligible. Obviously, they're not going to do that.
Yeah, I think that they've got to do some rebalancing here and should probably just rebuild, though. The question is like, when it comes down to rebuild, what assets do you have and what assets can you get for what you have? Like, Sabonis is the biggest chip that they can trade. 28 years old. He might be leading the league in rebounding this year. He's been awesome. I think he deserved an all-star nod. I personally thought he's been better than Fox, at least this season. So take from that what you will. But he's their biggest chip. But he's under contract for another 4 years or 3 years after this season, and he's 28 already. And so I think that if you could find a taker for him, you could maybe make a decision. But he's a weird player because he's more of a center in today's NBA. They tried to run him at power forward back in Indiana. They didn't really get anywhere. So how many teams need a starting all-star caliber center that are willing to fork over 40+ million for him in salaries?
Yeah, right now, number one in the NBA in rebounds per game at 14 plus 6 assists. Now, he's also putting up 59% from the field is phenomenal, 19 points.
My problem with him is he doesn't score enough. But I understand that it's kind of hard to score more.
Exactly. Right. That's part of it. But the other problem is 0.4 blocks. He doesn't offer much as a rim protector for the team, but the modern NBA, he's a very, very talented player that I think would have a lot of people interested. A lot of teams would be interested in him. So he would certainly be the big trade chip if they were potentially to try to rebuild this thing. And we look at what's happened with this group, the group that they've put together post De'Aaron Fox trade. And one of the things that's got to be concerning is you look at your 5 best players, right? And I know, look, Keon Ellis, he's got his fan club. I'm certainly one of them. But you look at their 5 best players, and especially when we consider salary and everything, Zach LaVine, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Sabonis. They are right now 364 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. They are a minus 8.5 in point differential. You can't have that, Donnie. You can't have your 5 best players are not only a net negative, but that big of a net negative on the floor together. That tells you changes simply have to be made.
Yeah, well, because they can't defend anything. They can defend a parked car with that group. That's
giving up 125 points per 100 possessions. That's 10th in the 10th percentile, I should say.
That's ridiculous. Like, they don't have anybody there that can do anything on the defensive end. So, of course, they're going to get lit up. And if they don't score to keep pace with it, which they're not, they're at 116.8, it looks like, they are not able to offset anything. And it's a very easy fix. You just plug in 1 or 2 more defensive players. They've already got one on the roster in Keon Ellis. And all of a sudden, things look a lot more appropriately slotted. And that means that Monk either needs to go. I'm not advocating for that, but at least go back to the bench, right? But that's just with their current iteration of this team. Like, I think you could do more rebalancing just in general. Maybe get a defensive 4 in there to play alongside Sabonis, like a high energy defensive 4 would be pretty nice. DeRozan also can't guard anybody. I don't know if you would want more of a 3-and-D type guy there. I think you could maybe do something like that. But yeah, it just depends on what they're trying to do, really.
Right. I mean, so to your point, you replace Malik Monk with Keon Ellis in that starting group, and they go to plus zero point 0.7 per 100 possession, which is not like you're not a juggernaut at that point. You're far from it, but that's a 9.2 points per 100 possession swing from
Yeah.
minus 8.5 with Malik Monk to plus 0.7 with Keon
And they're
Ellis.
almost all on the defensive side. Look at the points per possession change. It's
all
all on
defense.
defense. That's
You
crazy.
drop almost everything by it's all the defense, and that tells you, look, Malik Monk's a good player. I like Malik Monk. It just tells you how bad the fit is right now in Sacramento with this group and why this has to be rebalanced. Now, to take this to again, I do think that ultimately this is so far gone with this roster that they probably do need to tear it down. I think that's probably going to be the best bet for them. But we talked about this with the trade. Chicago had a hard time moving Zach LaVine. Is that going to change this summer? Maybe it won't be as difficult with just a couple years left. Maybe you decide we're going to build around Zach LaVine, who's still 29 years old. Okay. Maybe you decide you're going to do that. But from a conceptual level, let's say you decide we're just going to keep Sabonis and LaVine, which are probably your two biggest trade chips. We're going to build around that.
Not a bad start. I think
that's not a terrible start. Let's say we're going to build around that duo. Great. 3-and-D, everything else. Yep. Everything else that you put on this roster has to be able to defend. So that means DeMar DeRozan would have to go. Are you going to find much on the trade market for him? Probably not. Not with $25 million owed next year. That's the problem. Malik Monk, will somebody want him at $18 million? Probably as a sixth man. But again, there's multiple years left on that deal. That might prove to be a little bit challenging. Jonas Valanciunas, not a good defensive player, but at least he's an expiring contract as the third year's non-guaranteed. Maybe you can do something there. Keegan Murray, a guy that you've invested in as a big part of your future. You get Devin Carter going. There's the bones of something here, but are you going to be able to get enough in return for DeRozan and Malik Monk to build a respectable roster around LaVine and Sabonis, which would mean finding everything you can that can defend at a high level and just knock in an open shot? Because that's what, if you're going to build around those two guys, which I think is a reasonable option, you have to find guys who can defend and space the floor. And if you do that, I think the Kings could actually be pretty good with that duo. But I'm not saying they would win a championship, but could at least get back into the playoff mix. But I don't know if the other guys on the roster are worth enough to where they can land the pieces they need right now to make a LaVine and Sabonis team work.
I'll also say that, we oftentimes focus solely on championships. There are some teams that are okay existing in the middle.
Sure.
And there's not really anything wrong with that, really. You have a fun season. You maybe have a fun play-in game or playoff series like the Kings did a couple years ago, and that play-in and all that against the Warriors or whatever.
Yeah.
That first round series, I believe. But anyway, there are teams that are okay existing in that area. Maybe make a feisty second round exit or whatever it is. And the Kings could be a team like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I think maybe they will be looking for some internal growth. They've got some guys on this team like Jake LaRavia, Devin Carter, Keon Ellis, that Trey Lyles. I think that Keegan Murray, that they can kind of keep as part of their core or team next year. And maybe you are hoping for some internal growth from some of the younger guys there, but also maybe you turn to some appreciated free agents or two-way guys, and maybe you find a diamond in the rough with some of those guys. I think back to and they're not in the same situation because their guys aren't out, but Memphis last year really got to run and try a bunch of different guys, and they found some guys that they liked. And so maybe the Kings could find something like that too, or even the Lakers where they got Jordan Goodwin, who shouldn't have been, he's really good. He shouldn't have been just out there as a flyer for a team to take and try out. And maybe the Kings can find some guys like that too. But yeah, I think really what they're going to have to do is, and I like Monk. I think he's too small. I think he's too he's too skinny to really defend at a high level. So you need the offense. And the craziest thing about it is when you swap him for Ellis, the offense didn't actually even get worse. So that tells me that there's some sort of utilization error happening here too, where maybe they're not getting the most out of the combinations of guys that they have here. Maybe that's because this all came together just a few weeks ago or whatever it is, but there's some optimization that can also be had with this current group.
You want to know something else that's painful here for Sacramento? Their pick this year.
Oh my God.
It is top 12 protected.
Oh,
top 12. And right 12? Now, I mean, this is a dream this is like one of the best case scenarios for Atlanta, right? It's top 12 protected. And right now, if the draft stayed chalk, they would send the 14th pick to the Hawks.
They're sending Atlanta a lottery pick.
A lottery pick right now, because that would certainly be. I was thinking, do they have draft capital they could potentially use this year? But they have a first round pick protected 1 through 12 this year, 1 through 10 in 2026. And then Sacramento gets and then Atlanta would get a second round pick if those protections came in play in 2026 and 2027, if they don't send them there first. So right now, the Kings would be praying for lottery luck to move into the protected area, because that would make a difference for them this year too. Obviously, they're not going to drop any lower right now. I think we're too deep in the season for them to realistically fall too much farther. But I guess it's not impossible, but
I don't know how much they care, given that they decided to get Zach LaVine back instead of
and that's just it. Like, they could have really gone for future. I don't know what kind of future assets you were going to get for like, the pieces that you were going to give up there. What kind of future assets?
Those fake firsts, right?
Yeah, they got some fake firsts, but they're just in a tough spot when you look at in terms of future capital they could potentially move in a trade, and I don't necessarily think they should. God, Donnie, I keep looking at this and thinking LaVine and Sabonis are not bad. They're not bad players. They're good. Sabonis is very, very good. LaVine can light it up. Conceptually, do you want to build around two guys like that who both don't defend very well? Probably not. But if you put the right team around them, maybe there's something there, because they're both so good in other areas. But how do you get that other team? How do you get, obviously you keep Keon Ellis, and part of the answer can be just give more minutes to Keon Ellis. But the more I look at this, the more I feel like this turns into a Sabonis trade request. And then what do you do?
Yeah,
you just hope to get the most that you can for him and then truly tear it down.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's a solution out of this right now. They don't have options. So that may just be what it is that he asks out. But I kind of floated the question out there earlier, but who's in the market for a Sabonis?
Who's buying? Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, what would be the best fit? Let's say Sabonis hits the market. Teams are looking to trade. There's not a lot out there in free agency, so teams that want to improve are going to have to do so on the trade market.
It would be a team that I think is probably a Sabonis away from a championship.
You know what just popped into my head? You know what just popped into my head? That would be pretty good, and I think would actually fit the history of this team.
It's New York for Cat.
No, it's not New York for Cat. No.
Who is it?
The Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies pair him with Jaren Jackson Jr., who is a big-time shot blocker and can space the floor. And you've got the big man duo. We saw it with Zach Randolph in the past. Grit and grind, all that kind of stuff. Now, they already have Zach Edey there, I know. But
a good third base.
I could see they just fired their coach. I could see the Grizzlies trying to significantly shake things up, and a Sabonis and Jaren Jackson Jr. combo could be pretty good.
That's actually really good, because what's Jaren Jackson's weakness? He's not a good rebounder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sabonis is apparently the best rebounder in the league. Well, Sabonis isn't a good defensive player. Yep. Well, you can just put a former DPOY right there next to him. So
now, then how does Memphis do it without trading Ja? And we get it all the copy. But just in terms of what would be a good landing spot, he's a very good player. Yeah. There's a lot of teams I think he'd be good on, but who should really go after him? Memphis could be a team that would make some sense.
It's just the salary number, but really what it comes down to is that teams are going to have to, like we talked about before, they're going to have to just trade with each other to figure. And that's almost what the Kings did here, except the Kings didn't have a reason to do it. Like, they shouldn't have done that trade to get a player of just a little bit worse. Like, I don't think he's a huge dip, but they shouldn't have done that. But that's almost what they did here.
Okay, so I think at its core, part of the problem in Sacramento is because they've missed the playoffs for so long, they're afraid to pull the plug on this.
Correct.
And go into a rebuild. They finally made the playoffs again, then they were back out. They don't want to pull the plug on this because they missed it for so long, and they don't know if the fan base would tolerate going back into. They were rebuilding for 17 years. They're not going to tolerate going back into that, right? But if we took that aside, if we set that aside and said, forget about the past, what is the best path for this team right now to actually build a real and sustainable future? I think if you're able to look beyond the pain of the past, it's to fully tear it down.
That's what I think
it is. And get as many future assets as you can for Sabonis. If you can find a team that really needs a scorer that wants Zach LaVine, great. If you can move on from DeMar DeRozan, fantastic. If not, maybe you're talking buyout or something like that with him over the summer. Malik Monk will probably have some interest. Move on from those pieces. Rebuild. Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, take a seat. You're not going anywhere. Everyone else, Jake LaRavia, will hang on to him. Everybody else, let's rip this thing down to the studs and see what we can do the next summer. Maybe they can get a strong draft pick then. Let me make sure their 2026 pick isn't going. Okay, they have their 2026 pick. There you go.
Well, they also should
AJ, come on down in 2026.
Could you imagine? That's crazy. They shouldn't have. And I'll just say this as the last thing. Really, I don't know who they were trying to impress. Maybe it was Fox, but they shouldn't have going all the way back to last offseason, even floated that DeRozan contract. I don't really see the reason. The fit was bad in the first place. It wasn't really going to do anything, and it didn't work out as you would expect.
No.
But that's just kind of the nature of the organization right now, is they just kind of do things just because. So I don't know. That's why I was saying I think everyone needs to find a way up out of there.
Oh, man. Come on, Kings. No more Kings stuff here.
Yeah.
With a Z. Let's get this all figured out. I do think bite the bullet, burn it down, and then off you go. But we'll see what they actually do. Everybody, give us your thoughts in the comments down below. Sabonis maybe looking for a trade if the Kings really do decide to look towards the future. But is that actually the best path for Sacramento, a team that seems to be in turmoil right now? Give us your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to go check out our latest video about Taylor Jenkins getting fired 9 games before the playoffs by the Memphis Grizzlies. What is going on there? Go check that out right now.